Hey everybody. I am Ramon Mejia, host of the LitRPG podcast. It's going to be helpful if the camera's on me for this particular portion of it. This LitRPG podcast is the only podcast dedicated to LitRPG. We bring the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, author interviews. Today I'm talking to the author of Delvers LLC. You might have got a sneak peek already. His novel is beloved by LitRPG readers around the world, folks. It has over 200 reviews, of which 95% are 4 or 5 stars, which is an amazing feat. Believe me, I've done the research on this. His novel is an amazing journey into a LitRPG world. Welcome to the podcast, Blaise Corvin.
Wow, you're going to make me blush. So, yeah, I'm Blaise Corvin. All your audience will probably notice that I am wearing armor because I wanted to establish my geek cred. So yes, this is custom armor, Krug, Bazoo bands, and I've got Red Bull. So hopefully everybody will take me seriously now as I talk about my silly story.
Hey, I think you've gone the extra mile in establishing your medieval credibility. So thank you very much for taking that extra time, man.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the appreciation because this shit is hot.
Yeah, that's something you don't think about when you're describing when you think about people wearing armor is the heat factor.
Yeah, in fact, this is custom made for me. This is an actual real set of armor. I'm supposed to be wearing like a gambeson or some sort of padding under it. Like you can't even see my pauldrons because it's a little too big for me without padding. So it's actually supposed to sit more like this. But since I'm only wearing I look like a very heavily armed Target employee right now with this shirt on. So this is what everybody's just going to have to deal with.
I say always be prepared for the zombie apocalypse. I hope to one day have an armor and weapon collection of my own just in case the zombies come through.
Absolutely. It's kind of like a fire extinguisher, right? You know, you'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear what you're saying, man. Okay, so for the audience members who aren't familiar with your work, who haven't taken the time to read it, and they should be reading Delvers LLC, can you tell me a little bit about yourself as an author and your background a little bit?
Sure. So I've been writing pretty much my whole life. In fact, I think I can remember first writing a story when I was 8 years old. I mean, it was terrible. It was a story about trading cheeseburgers to aliens for alien technology. But I've been writing pretty much my whole life, and it wasn't until fairly recently that I really decided to try doing it commercially. Like I've always been writing for myself. I wasn't putting it out there. I didn't feel like I was skilled enough. But I've been a prolific reader. I've just been reading like crazy my whole life. So I kind of had an idea of what story I wanted to tell. So I actually really started like mid last year. And the first story I wrote was freaking terrible. Like I got 40,000 words in and I just dumped it. It was god awful. And I wasn't too proud to admit it. And I was really depressed and I had writer's block. And as a writing exercise, I started writing like 1 or 2 chapters of just random ideas I came up with. And Delvers LLC was actually one of those writing exercises. I posted it online. At the time, I was only on Wattpad because I didn't know any better. And I got a couple comments. You know, and on Wattpad, if you get a single comment when you're not writing like werewolf, love triangle, you know, romance, self-insert with Donald Trump fiction or something like that, like nobody even cares. So writing fantasy and putting this out there and actually getting a comment was huge to me at the time. So yeah, I just started writing Delvers and kind of the rest is history. But me personally, my background, I grew up on the West Coast. I joined the military right out of high school. And I was airborne infantry for a while, and I reclassed, and I was an IT guy in the Army, and I just kind of floated around the U.S. for quite a while until I eventually found my way to Texas, and now I work in IT as a program manager. So I really like my job. I like the challenge, and I also like the fact that I'm not broke anymore. So yes.
We're not being broke. It's nice.
Yeah. I got plenty of practice with the opposite, so this looks good on me.
Yeah, this is not being broke is a good alternative. I have to say it's a nice lifestyle. Okay, so thanks for the background information on yourself. I guess it kind of explains how descriptive your battle scenes are. If you have a military background, it shows. I think it kind of comes through in your story a little bit. So thank you very much for sharing that a little bit. Now about Delvers LLC itself, I think it's a wonderful story, but not everybody's read it. Can you give us a small description of what the story is about?
Sure. And before I do that, I want to preface this as something I actually forgot to mention before. But I'm really, well, you can probably tell by my, the sharp pointy things all over everywhere. But I'm really into like sword fighting. Like when I was younger, I did SCA, which stands for Society for Creative Anachronism, where people basically dress up in armor like this and beat each other with rattan sticks. And I also have done HEMA, which is historical European martial arts, and that's where people actually read the treatises and the arming manuals and really study it as a martial art, which is really deadly. I mean, if you do it, you really realize quickly that most fights are over in 2 or 3 seconds. So I wanted to kind of port this over to a fantasy story. Like I said, I was suffering from writer's block. I was kind of depressed, and I was like, there aren't that many stories out there that are really about like guys who kind of know what they're doing, that come to a fantasy world and maybe have a few skills that might matter. And I was also really irritated by J-Lit stories where like, some random otaku dude would like end up, and invariably all of them spend like 3 or 4 chapters inventing soy sauce again. The entire world they end up on, of course, couldn't have invented soy sauce. And then they invent soy sauce, and there's like another 3 or 4 chapters where everybody is like, oh, main character Sama, like, we love your soy sauce. Let us make you king. It's just ridiculous stuff. Like, I love Portal Fantasy and I love LitRPG. And I was so frustrated that I kept reading these stories, and then like 10 chapters in, it would just devolve into these tropes, and I would just groan and roll my eyes. So when I started Delvers, it was really about kind of like this cliche sort of transported to another world, but I wanted to make a twist, which is realistic characters and kind of some realistic skills and main characters who, they still have to struggle to survive, but I mean, realistically, if an average person is teleported into the middle of a monster-infested fantasy world, they're gonna be food. So I wanted to give my characters just enough knowledge and skill that they could kind of fake their way through surviving, at least until they can start developing real skills. And it's really funny. I didn't even actually know that I was writing LitRPG until I saw your podcast and your website. I was actually on my website, and I was like, I wonder who's pinging me, because I totally don't stalk my own work. I do, but I was like, what is this podcast like? What is this Geek Bites? And then I went to Geek Bites. I went to your website, and I was like, holy shit! I've read all of these.
Yeah, so that happens a lot. It's like, oh, I'm discovering these things that I love. It has a name. Awesome.
Yeah. So that's kind of what happened there is I was writing, I would call it soft LitRPG, but it's it's LitRPG, and I didn't even know it. So I have to give you a thank you for that, because you were the one who actually let me know what LitRPG was in the first place.
Hey, you found your people through me, and I'm happy to be the emissary of LitRPG for you, man.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's really funny because since joining the community, it's the only other time I felt like I belonged so much was like going to Dragon Con or other huge geek conventions. And yeah. I've talked to other authors who are writing LitRPG now who have done other stuff beforehand, and they feel the same way. It's like, I really feel like it's a real meeting of minds. But
absolutely, I feel the same way. I was talking on a podcast, I think last week, and I mentioned the same thing. That one of the biggest draws to the genre is the community. As a writer, as an author, as a reader, everybody right now is really kind of intimate because it's kind of a smaller genre, and you kind of feel the intimacy as a fellow geek or gamer, whatever you want to call it, within the writing. You feel like, oh, this is somebody who has the same interest in me. And there was nerdy about game stats and character development as I am, or weapons or whatever the case is. So it is a wonderful thing to have. Now going back to Delvers LLC, your book description. Tell me about that story. Like, you have your main characters, Henry and Jason. You've talked about them briefly a little bit. The book starts out with them practicing their weapons training. I want to say it's for FEMA. I'm not really good with the acronyms.
FEMA.
And then they're suddenly somewhere else. And take it from there.
Okay, so the story starts with, like you said, Henry and Jason are in the middle of a field. They have no idea what happened to them, and Dolos shows up. And Dolos is probably one of my favorite characters among readers in my story. I don't want to like say anything because I don't want to make anything canon per se. There's still a lot of unknowns in the story, but Dolos is like a 20-foot tall man floating in the air, complaining about Terrans, and he says basically that Henry and Jason were transported to that planet for research. Everything he's working towards experimenting, and he doesn't say what for. He basically tells Henry and Jason that they're probably going to die. He doesn't care. They are not the chosen ones. There is no, demon lord. There's no demon king. He doesn't give them any direction whatsoever. There's a duffel bag with some random shit in it, and then he takes off. And to this day, I know it's my story, and it's kind of ridiculous, but I personally just love that opening, because so many stories start with, like, the main character is the chosen one, or I was thinking to myself, if I were ever transported to another world, I would not be a prince. I would be the most random nobody with the crappiest gear ever. And I kind of wanted to bring that into my story. Like, here are these two guys. They might have some skills that could be relevant, but they've got nothing, and they have no idea where they're supposed to go. There is no map. There is no, like, lighted trail like in an MMORPG. It's just, they're just out there in the middle of nowhere. So Henry and Jason basically get right into the action, because they're bumbling around. They're trying to figure out where they are. They have a map, and they see some people who are being led by what they think are goblins. And they actually have a conversation about whether they should do anything or not, because it's dangerous. They've got, the goblins have weapons. They've got basically crap for gear, and that's kind of where the story starts. And I think that I really wrote Delvers. I mean, all writers write for themselves, right? But I really wrote Delvers as a reader, like what I wanted to see, because I am a huge Portal fantasy geek. I love when characters from our world are transported to another world. And I just wanted, I wanted to explore those characters, kind of a difficult situation right off the bat. So that's kind of what Delvers is about. It's about two guys who are sent to another planet, who have to deal with real problems, like finding food, finding water, dealing with the locals, dealing with different cultures. And it's probably not the greatest thing to say. It's a little negative, but a lot of my motivation was kind of frustration with JLit tropes. Like, for instance, if you read a lot of JLit transported stories, there's cat people, there's all these races, but they act exactly like humans. And not only do they act exactly like humans, they act exactly like Japanese humans. So I figured that if there are people growing up with ears, and they have animal senses, and they have, I mean, they're going to have a completely different culture. So I wanted to kind of bring that into a story where, humans from our world, if they have to interact with these folks, they have to kind of learn their culture. It's like they're not coming into another planet with no risk. Like, they could really be killed. And I mean, even today, even in civilized society, if you piss people off too bad, or just walk up to a random person and say, "Yo mama," like, something bad might happen to you. So I
definitely agree that your story has some interesting cultural aspects that other stories don't have, especially when it comes to the beast clans, where there's a variety of different animal characteristics imposed upon people. People are going to be familiar from other, like, Japanese literature or other Korean literature, and I like the approach that you took, in that they're not just the regular Luddite culture. They have their own specific characteristics. Were they based on anything in particular any particular like regular human culture that you kind of threw in there?
So yes and no. Some of my readers have caught that the Mohali, which is the beast people, have some characteristics of Japanese culture, and specifically not just Japanese culture, but like warrior culture in general. I consider myself kind of an amateur student of history, which means I'm really not. Anybody who calls himself that just has read a few books and has a high opinion of themselves, and I'm no exception. So I've always been fascinated by warrior culture. So really, the Mojave culture is kind of like a cross between ancient Greek culture, like Japanese culture, and Ottoman culture, and it's just it with obviously a twist. Like, humans don't have claws, and they don't have, if you omit some of their name, they're not going to kill you. But some cultures, especially if you look in our past, even Roman culture. I love researching ancient Roman culture because there are so many oddities to us in our current, modern Western culture. But if you or I were to be transported to ancient Rome right now, we would be lost. We would be completely lost.
No, I think you describe very well what it is to be a human in a foreign land, and that experience of culture shock, learning new customs, and the things that we kind of take for granted as Americans. That they're, even in modern time, you go into Europe, things are done differently. There are different social customs, and if you don't observe them, you get in trouble. And that's only magnified if we're going to an entirely different world where their history is different entirely. So they've had hundreds of years to develop their own social structures, cultures, right and wrong views of things that are there. And I think you did a really good job of saying these guys aren't from around here. They're not going to have an easy time adjusting, not just to the monster-filled world, but to the different social norms. And if they don't adapt, they're going to die. And so that's the incentive for them to kind of make mistakes and learn from them. So I really like that sense of realism that you have in the story, and that not everything's easy, not everything's going to go smoothly, but they're going to endure. And I think that's part of their charm, that they're willing to learn and be considered jerks and asses, and that it's okay. That's part of the learning process of a real character.
Yeah. And it's funny, while I was writing that part, I am a web serial writer. So before I published, I was releasing my chapters, week after week. And I got a lot of good feedback from that. But it was kind of interesting that, in our subculture, in our geek subculture, in our subculture of LitRPG readers and like Portal readers, there's a, I'm not trying to throw shade, because I love all the stories. But at the same time, when I was writing about some of these altercations, some of my readers were like, "Why don't they just go away? Why don't they just say screw this? Like, why are Henry and Jason putting up with this?" And I mean, I'm drawing on like some of my own experiences, like being in Afghanistan and being in places where you don't have any support, you don't have any friends around. Like, if you were to dump me in the middle of Afghanistan right now, and I found a family, like, I'm not talking about a city, because cities are cities, but just like out in the countryside, and I was hungry and thirsty and had no money and I had no way to support myself. If I found some family that I thought might take care of me and give me a job, I mean, it sure as hell beats living out in the cold and not having any food. So.
Right, no, absolutely. When you're in another culture or location like that, when you just drop somewhere, you adapt or die. And so these guys are very much survivors. And if they hadn't adapted, if they'd kind of gone on their way, they most definitely wouldn't have lasted past chapter 1.
And I think that, I mean, I don't want to give like sob stories or anything like that, but there have been times in my life that weren't so great. And I was really drawing from some of those experiences when I was writing those like, it's hard to put in type how a person can feel so lost and out of place and really not have a sense of home. And I hope that nobody has to experience that. But if you were picking that up, I did my job, and I'm really glad that you liked it. So thank you.
Yeah, it comes through some of those. I hadn't realized how much of that came through until you mentioned it, just because I've kind of had that same experience of not having much and being lost in a strange world and being in locations where it's like this place, even though they may speak English or they may look like me in some respect, everything's different, and
you feel
alone, and you almost feel like you're in an alien civilization, just because all those little comforting things, from architecture to language skills to just like customs that you take for granted on a daily basis as being, you know, the thing that you do, don't exist. And so there's very much I guess an immigrant mentality associated with that transitionary period that sometimes that just doesn't exist in some portfolios, that and I kind of including in mine a little bit now that I think about it, but it's out, so that's too late to change. But I do like that about you. Now tell me a little bit about your other characters. We have Henry and Jason. They're new to the world. They meet a few folks. Can you tell me about some of your, I don't want to call them side characters because they take such a huge part in the story. Can you tell me about them a little bit?
Sure. So I guess I don't want to give too many spoilers, but you know, if anybody's listening to this part, they're low key asking for it. So I'm just going to move along. So we've got George, who is from South Africa, and he is one of my favorite characters because he's kind of like, he kind of knows what's up, and he's not real happy about the fact that there's danger in his life, and I really wanted to kind of make him a mysterious character to readers. George has lived a long life, and he's lived a full life. Like, he's done every decade justice, and he's really one of my favorite characters. And he is Marine's grandfather. Marine is a character who shows up pretty early in the story, and she begins tying her life very closely with Henry and Jason for various reasons. And she is kind of like, she's kind of like the perfect mediator, if you will. And Henry and Jason actually realize how lucky they got. That's my my out for plot armor, is my characters realize they have plot armor. But because Marine is the granddaughter of a man who's from Earth as well and got sent to Ludus. So she's a Ludin. So she understands the local culture, but she also got some from her grandfather, and that way she's able to kind of bridge the gap a little bit between Henry and Jason and this entire world around them, who are not impressed or amused by their antics at all. So, and then, you know, as they move further on, they meet some Mohali people who are the beast people, who I personally absolutely love writing. Like, it's really hard to write them and try to, like, just sitting down and thinking, how would I think if I'm not a human? I'll be honest, it takes drinking a lot of hard cider to get in that headspace. Like, what idioms would I use if I had claws? You know, that's not the kind of question that normal people ask themselves. So I really enjoy writing the Mohali, and I also really enjoy writing the Areva. They're space elves. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. They're space elves, and I really like elves, but elves, like Tolkien elves, have been done to death. You know, if you get online and ask people, are elves tall or are elves short, you're gonna have World War III. Like, that's something that geeks feel very strongly about one way or another. So I wanted to have a fresh take on elves. It's not really because, you know, Warhammer has done it, like 40K. It's not like space elves are something that I coined myself, but I really wanted to explore the idea that humans are feared. And that's kind of I really set Delvers in the same universe as the other story that I wanted to write, and I've been world building for like 10 years. So I had a lot of this backstory and like the actual world building done in my head. That really helped with the speed of writing book one of Delvers. But what I was thinking, and I really like tropes. I like tropes because they're fun. I mean, we all recognize them, but I really like when people take a trope and turn it sideways and make it a little bit fresh. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted humans who are usually in video games and stories, it basically anything where there's humans and aliens. Humans are kind of like the basic vanilla. You know, you play a role-playing game, and humans don't really get any attribute increases. They're just kind of there. They're like, if you don't want to play some lizard scale man or don't want to see in the dark, you can be this guy. And that just, like, if you actually look at human beings, we're actually a pretty powerful species. Like, we've colonized our entire world. You can take a naked man who knows who has some knowledge, take a naked ass man, throw him out in the middle of a jungle, and he can build himself a house and like weapons and probably kill all the animals around him. That's actually kind of impressive. So I wanted to explore this idea that there is this space-faring race that is, you know, technologically advanced, but they still fear humans, and that's kind of where I was coming with the Areva.
Yeah, no, I kind of like that different viewpoint of humans being feared because of their destructive nature, almost as if they're the monster to other cultures because of their destructive potential and the things that they've done when they've been transported to other worlds. And I also like the fact that you're explaining why all these different looking races exist in the same world is because, you know, Dolos, the god, is experimenting in the world. He's grabbing different species from different worlds and dropping them on the same planet, and that's the explanation of why there are different, you know, monster races and different humanoid races, whether they're elf-like or, you know, cat-like or animal-like or human-like, whatever the case is. Like, everybody's imported from other planets, and so there's going to be, especially over time, clashes of culture, clashes of ideologies, and that kind of shapes the world as a whole. And it's a very interesting way to develop your story and give you a lot of flexibility about creating unique storylines, unique backgrounds for your characters and your cultures. And I definitely enjoy that a lot.
You're onto my secret. Dolos is the DM.
That's what that's actually. I'm like, oh, is Dolos just another name for Blaise? Because that's what it feels like.
No. I have enough fans already who call me Dolos, and I'm trying to sync that. I'm afraid that if I go to conventions, like say a year or two from now, you know, if I have more readers and I go to conventions, if they see me, I want people to like not to refer to me as Dolos.
Well, we can nip that in the bud. We'll think of him as the DM, or like almost the scientist who's just conducting an experiment in this particular case. And I kind of understand that coming from a science background. So like, yeah, sometimes you have to be the detached observer for your experiment. You can't care about, you know, your subjects, otherwise it ruins the entire process. So I kind of got that about the character as well. Awesome. Now let's move on from the general description of Delvers LLC to anything else that you're working on currently. I know you finished Delvers LLC. You put it out into the world. It's had some great success. Are you working on anything else besides that at the moment?
Yeah, actually, I'm writing a novella right now. The series title is actually Secret of the Old Ones. I haven't decided on a title for the first book yet, but it's hard lit RPG. So like anybody who's read Delvers knows that it's what I consider to be soft lit RPG, where a lot of the like stats, basically a lot of the mechanics are kind of in the background so that the story is in the foreground. Secret of the Old Ones is like, it's like old school lit RPG, like what I started with. Like, what's a good example? I'm going to mangle the name here. In English, it is it okay to pick up girls in a dungeon?
Yeah, I love that story. It's one of my favorite animes, and the story, the actual light novel story is really good as well. Yeah.
The MC versus the Minotaur is always going to be one of my favorite scenes. But I love that series. It just has such a bad name. But
I personally really love the name because it feels different. It doesn't feel, you can tell like, oh, this is a translation of something else, but it's still kind of this cool like twist on, it's not just a general, you know, dungeon crawl fantasy story. It's also about love and that core idea in that particular story of like, is it okay to pick up dungeons girls in a dungeon?
Well, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree, because that's not something I would want to.
That's where his grandpa found love, and so he grew up saying, "I'm going to find love in a dungeon because that's what my grandpa told me to do."
I want to hear more about Grandpa. But yeah, that's not a series title that I'd want to walk around on my T-shirt, like, you know, just around town. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, moving right along. I really love that story, and that is more of like a set in the real world story, like Delvers. And for anybody watching, Delvers is, you know, it is set in the real world. Like, it's not in a game. There are like game advancements, but it's not in a game. I wanted to write something in a game, especially after reading like Cosmo Yap's excellent, like The Game.
Yeah.
I love that book. And so I started writing Secret of the Old Ones. And the way I differentiated myself and really had fun writing this novella is that it's set in a game that is like an H.P. Lovecraft-esque, like Victorian era setting. So everybody in the games has like swords and knives and what have you, but they also have flintlocks and caplock rifles and pistols. So it's kind of like a transition era of technology. And, you know, that way the people who want to play steampunk can play steampunk. And I really wanted to explore that kind of like, there's some people that would only play the game to be steampunk, and there would be other people who kind of like look down on those people, just like now in geek culture. So basically, it's kind of like, for me anyway, Delvers is really my way of kind of telling my own Portal story and pointing out some of the things that I feel like some authors in the past 20, 30 years have failed to do. Like, for instance, using fantasy races as an allegory for real life races and touching on racism, and then just like backing away from it. It's like, we're going to talk about it, but they're all really friends and there's no consequences, any of this shit. Like, I want to like really get into how people actually would react in the fantasy world. Secret of the Old Ones is how geek culture really would react in a game. Like, I love VR stories, but a lot of times in VR stories, it seems like everybody is playing the game seriously. You know, there are no people just killing people for lulz. I wanted to have that. Like, there is a group of dudes running around with masks on who just freaking player kill all day long, and they love that shit.
They just gank, and they love the chaos that they sow. Exactly.
Like, when my very first MMO was Shadowbane, and there was a guild on there called Lords of Death, and I hated those motherfuckers. So, yeah. But I revered them and I respected them too. They actually, even though they were dicks, they made my gameplay more valuable to me, because anything that I accomplished was more valuable, since I was able to avoid people who were actually trying to kill me. It's like, I think a lot of games nowadays have been dumbed down to the point where people don't fear that. And I personally, as an old school gamer, I love that. Like, PvP and vanilla WoW, like, if you were running around in contested territory and you were able to get through the day as a low level and not get ganked and, like, you know, corpse camped, I mean, you felt this amazing sense of accomplishment. And I don't know, maybe I'm sure that there are other people out there who think I'm crazy, but I know that if I were playing an immersive VR game, I would also be looking for that type of experience. But I wanted to write Secret of the Old Ones in a way that, as an intelligent developer, they wouldn't force people to do that. So it is kind of more like, you know, Sword Art Online, where people can just play as a shopkeeper if they want to do that. And that's one thing I loved about Sword Art Online. I know I'm jumping all over the place, but but I like, when the first time I ever watched Sword Art Online and I saw that players were actually shopkeepers and full-time crafters, I really like that, because nowadays in games, it's like developers are trying to appeal to everybody equally, and I personally just don't think that works very well. There are some people who just want to craft. So I thought that was really, really interesting, and I wanted to port that in.
I'm one of them. I enjoy crafting to the extreme, even though it's really repetitive. It's for some reason, it's really comforting and enjoyable. To me, like, I create a great weapon in an MMO or a video game. I think I find that as satisfying as, you know, killing the boss monsters sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to, like, Crowfall, that it's coming out next year. They've made a lot of promises. If they fulfill those promises, if Artcraft does, yeah, I know, right? But if they fulfill those promises and people really can be like a dedicated crafter, and guilds will need those people, that's going to be amazing. Like, I know that there are people who also want to have that play style. In fact, I might even roll a character that way. It just sounds so interesting. Like,
yeah.
Enough of that. I don't want to, like, plug Crowfall the entire time.
No. I love Secret of the Old Ones. I haven't read it all. I read the first few chapters, then I had to stop, just because I don't want to spoil it for myself when I read it as a fully published Amazon book. That's just the way I kind of do things. But I enjoyed it. Like, your main character starts off, your story begins where your character is not level 1, which I thought was an interesting way to introduce the story, because that level 1 character development arc has been done. And so you don't necessarily have to start at level 1 and still be an interesting story. So I like that portion of it. So tell me a little about the beginning of Secrets of the Old Ones, so that myself and people in the audience can understand where your character starts at and what makes your story special.
So I need to preface this too, that for everybody getting to know me, you know, because not everybody knows me, I am a very lazy writer. Just like Jim Butcher. In fact, I got a lot of writing tips from Jim Butcher. And, you know, when Jim Butcher can say I'm a lazy writer and be serious, so can I. I'm just going to be honest. So not only am I a lazy writer, but so far, everything I've written that I've actually liked and other people have liked has been a complete accident. I am garbage at creating a story from scratch, like actually trying to create a story. Like Delvers was a writing exercise. Secret of the Old Ones was actually a writing contest on a weekend on Royal Road. There was a Senizal, who is a writer in Writers to the End, challenged my group on Royal Road, which is LitRPG Society, to like basically a write-off where somebody is going to give a picture to both of us, like an image, and we're both going to write a short story on that. So I basically wrote I wrote the first chapter of Secret of the Old Ones, and I really liked it, and a lot of other people really liked it too. And I got PMs, and other people were telling me, "Hey, you should make this a series." And I was like, you know what? I'm lazy. This thing's already written. Let's freaking do it. So I just started writing it, and yeah. So basically, the story starts with Vale Depardon, who is the character of Trent Noguero, and he is playing like this kind of gentleman scholar character, and he started basically with a luck build. Like he's got a very high luck stat. He learned that in Secret of the Old Ones, like stats are very few and far between. Like by the end of a character, once everybody is max level, they only have 60 points to, you know, put in their various stats. So stats are important. That said, if you find something that gives you stats, it can often be permanent, which is amazing, and they're very, very rare. So he went in as an experienced gamer with this, you know, crazy theory that he was going to put everything in his luck stat, and it has paid off a little bit. And he's gotten some rare drops. He's gotten, you know, some luck increase or some stat increases, but everything is hinging on this item that he found 6 months ago, which is a map. And he's learned about it. Like in Secret of the Old Ones, I really wanted to go back to kind of my experience in old school MMOs. Like in vanilla WoW, it took me forever to get max level. So in Secret of the Old Ones, Vale is level 10. He just hit level 10, which is 1/3 of the way to max rank, and it took him a year. Like this is a pretty serious game, but at the same time, it offers so many people so much that most of the world is playing it. So anyway, he is figuring out this map, and he thinks that it leads to the legendary thing that the developers have been hinting at. And that's another thing I wanted to introduce in the Secret of the Old Ones that I'm really excited about with like Crowfall and games like that is I don't like balance. I think it's fun when people can play however they want. Like in the 90s when I read like the Riffs RPG book, and you know, there used to be all these games where if you wanted to, you could play as a homeless guy when other people are walking around in like walking tanks. So I wanted to really show this game like this where people can really be like a true sandbox experience, not something they just call a sandbox experience where at the end by end game everybody still looks the same. That's to me is not a sandbox experience. So Vale basically takes a gamble, uses this map, throws all of his savings into it, barely misses being murdered by one of his arch nemesis in the game, and something amazing happens, and that's kind of the start of the story.
Yeah, that's a great description. I definitely appreciate that description of it. It tells you enough, hints of the good stuff, but it doesn't spoil it for you. So thank you very much. And if you want to read Secret of the Old Ones, you can find it on the Royal Road or on Blaise Corvin's website, blaisecorvin.com. You know, we'll have a link in the show notes for you guys. But also, I wanted to mention that you are planning to release it as a novella on Amazon. When will that be coming out?
Probably around January. That's what I'm hoping, is that probably mid to late January. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we'll have something new to read from you very soon. Now, that doesn't mean you're not still working on Delvers LLC Book 2. You're still working on that one, right?
Yeah, actually writing something else has allowed me to write Delvers quicker. So it's it's a little, it's not real logical. And I was actually afraid that my work on Delvers would suffer by writing other things. But so far, being able to switch between the two has kind of made it fresh for me. So I'm able to walk into it with a new set of eyes and get really excited again and write something, just pound out the words.
Oh, good for you. I'm glad you found a method of writing and keeping it interesting and not boring and not tedious, because writing can get that way sometimes if you're forcing it from yourself. But if it just flows because of your creativity, I think that's the best way to write an interesting story.
Yeah, I need chaos. I need the lights are off. There's weird lights around. There's like weird, crazy music, like songs that have nothing to do with each other playing in a playlist. And lots of hard cider on the table. Like my other writers who are much less lazy than me, they plot things out. They're really meticulous. They're really intelligent about things. I just kind of put some points out there and drive from point A to point B like hillbillies in a rusted out Ford and some shine. So
that's a very interesting way to write a story. I have to say, I haven't tried that method. I may do so at some point if I get stuck in a particular place. That sounds like a very fun way to break through your writer's block.
There's actually a name for it, and you can. I don't know if you've seen them. Sanderson does a bunch of writing talks at like BYU, and they're posted on YouTube. And there are outline writers and discovery writers. I'm a discovery writer, but if I just sit down and try to write a story from point A to point B and without any kind of control, it will I don't even know where I'll go. I'll start in freaking the Palace of Caesar and end up with dinosaurs with laser beams on their heads and shit. So what I do is I put together like a very loose outline of maybe 6 points, plot points that I want to hit in the story. And then I write from one point to the next and from the next to the next and so on and so forth. That way, as a discovery writer, like the strength of a discovery writer is fleshing out characters. But the weakness of a discovery writer is not having a well-plotted story. So by having those plot points, I can still get to the ending I want to get to without readers going like, what the hell happened here?
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I'm kind of the same way. In book one, I wrote the story Adventures on Terror for people who don't know, and I was kind of the same way. I didn't want it to be completely outlined because that is boring. It's like spoiling your own story in a way. But I didn't want it to be unstructured. I don't want to not know where I'm going. So I did the same thing. I had about 6 or 7 points where I knew where I wanted the story to go a little bit, but they're really vague. So it's like a really loose outline. And everything else just kind of made up in between. So, and my characters didn't always go where I thought they were going to go at first necessarily. And I like that about storytelling.
Embrace it.
They take on their own mindsets, they take on their own motivations, and they just kind of do what they want to do sometimes.
Yeah, you just embrace. If you're a discovery writer, just embrace the chaos. Just own it and just figure that it's not going to make any goddamn sense until you get to like editing. But you'll have structure. You'll have good characters. But you'll have good characters. So that's the plus side.
Perfect. Now, speaking of the things that you do about writing schedules, what do you think the hardest thing for you about writing is, and what's the easiest thing about writing for you?
Honestly, the hardest thing is just starting every day that I write, because it's like there are a million other things to do. Like I'm just everybody's busy, so I don't want to be too self-indulgent here, but I'm very busy, and sometimes my job can be like a 60, 70. I haven't had an 80-hour week, but it's like a 60, 70-hour week sometimes, and still pounding out a chapter can be very trying, because for me personally, because I am a discovery writer, like I need to be in a certain headspace. I can't approach it like work or it just doesn't happen. So I need to be in that correct space, and I can usually get that way if I start actually writing. If I have an idea and I put that first paragraph down, I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I wonder what happens next, because I'm kind of like reading the story as I write it. But yeah, sometimes getting the motivation to do that is tough. For me personally, the way I get past that is loads of crushing guilt. And I get that from my website and from Patreon. It's like everybody paying me on Patreon to write. Anytime I don't feel like writing, I get on Patreon. I'm like, oh my God, all these people are paying me to write and I'm not writing, so I just feel terrible about myself, and I feel like I'm a bad person because I am being a bad person, and I'm like, and I just pull up a Word document and start pounding some stuff out, and that's usually my process. So like if my chapter is late, it's usually because I needed to stare at the Patreon for a little bit longer before I got, the motivation. It's like, if I have the week off, that's no big deal. But if I come home from work and it's been a long day, sometimes it can be a real challenge. So I'm so happy. I'm so glad that all my readers are so patient with me, because I don't even have a release schedule. It's just like once a week, sometime or other. And everybody is just so gracious and so supportive of me. And I couldn't ask for a better audience. I just really couldn't.
Yeah, I think it's super funny that your Patreon, which is patreon.com/Blaise Corvin, link in the show notes for you guys who want to support Blaise there, that it's kind of your mom guilt. It's the kind of guilt that motivates you to be a better person and to kind of do the right thing.
So I have a really funny story.
Hilarious. Yeah.
I have a really funny story for you. This is the true story. True story. So my family didn't care about my writing at all for the longest time. It just wasn't real to them. It's like, oh, you have this hobby, right?
Yeah, he's doing this fun thing. Good for you, Blaise.
Yeah. So I had this first book come out, and my family still didn't care. I'm like, yeah, I launched my book. It's been out. It's doing pretty well. They're like, well, have you made any money? I'm like, yeah, I've made money. And they asked me how much, and I told them, and they were like, really? All of a sudden, they cared about my silly hobby. And my family is such, they're not geeky at all. Like I have members of my family who refuse to see a single Star Wars movie. They don't like sci-fi. They don't like fantasy. My entire family read my book, and my family is like very, they're not afraid to tell me if they don't like something, and they all legitimately liked it. So I created a monster though, because now my mom actually reads my story on my website, and literally twice a week she calls me up and she's like, where's the new chapter? Like, you need to write fast. So this week, honestly, I'm not making this up. Literally, this happened today. My mom has been asking me about Patreon, and she's like, you have another chapter on there, right? So I said yes, and I explained how Patreon actually works. My mom signed up for my Patreon page today for $2 so that she can get the next chapter ahead of time.
That is super funny, and thank you for sharing your story. Talk about some real mom guilt to get you motivated to write, man. That's like double duty now, Patreon and real mom's guilt.
Yeah. She was trying to guilt me into like getting around it too. She's like, I used to buy you all this stuff when you were a kid. And I mean, she was putting a serious, we all know how that can work. And I'm like, well, you're still going to get the chapter either way. It's not like I'm keeping it from you. And she couldn't argue with that for like the last couple weeks. Finally, she gave in. She's like, I'll just put the $2 on the Patreon thingy.
That way you have to give it to me first. I need my fix now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's weird having my mom call and text me about like my stories about killing goblins and shit, But on the other hand, it is so validating as a grown-ass man having my mom like, wanting to read my story that badly that she's willing to pay my Patreon page.
No, I totally understand what you're saying, man. It's a weird sort of validation that someone's willing to pay you to do the thing that you like to do. Because I felt the same way the first time someone signed up for my Patreon for the Geek Pass podcast and the LitRPG podcast. I was like, I put it up like almost 2 years ago when I started the Geek Pass podcast, and I'd kind of forgotten about it because nobody had signed up for it. And so I'm like, okay, this is just a thing I put out there. If people want to do it, great. If they don't, I'm still going to make this thing that I love doing. And then when I started the LitRPG podcast, there's just such a great community around it. People were just like, okay, here's $1, here's $2, and then it was like $6, and then $10 a month. I'm like, wow, this is quite touching, because this is like somebody putting down their money saying, we like this, do what you like to do, man, and do it well. And I'm
going to totally take some credit for that. I know that I contributed and started some of that. And you know what? It couldn't happen to a better person, because you are such a fantastic advocate for the LitRP genre. And like I said earlier, I can't remember if it was before our call, now, or during, but you are actually the person who let me know that LitRPG was a genre. I had no idea prior to that. So, I'm so happy that that people are starting to put support you like that, because I know that a huge portion of our community watches this podcast and they support what you do, and they obviously support your book. I mean, I should be interviewing you. So, just keep doing what you're doing, man.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. I mean, this whole thing comes out of just love for this genre of game mechanics in a fantasy and sci-fi setting, and all the variety of stories that we have possible within our kind of unique niche, and how fulfilling it is. And for me, the genre of LitRPG almost fulfills like the dreams and hopes I have for like MMOs and video games, and like what it would be like to live in those universes and have a world and a universe that makes sense and that had rules that I could exploit for my benefit in some ways, to make me powerful and to make me more, and so that's one of the things I love about a little bit, and it just motivates me to make the podcast, to be a super reader and have a recommendation list, and all that stuff is almost secondary. Oh, not secondary, but I wrote a story because I loved LitRPG, and it just kind of synergized with the other stuff I did, and I think that contributes to the success of Adventures on Terror for me personally. But it was almost just accidental in my wheelhouse. I did everything because I love the genre and I love our community.
Yeah, I mean, LitRPG helped keep me sane, because games anymore, like MMOs, suck. Like WildStar, seriously, freaking pandas.
I don't mind the panda thing personally. Just the mechanics were not fulfilling. Like for me, MMOs have always been a love-hate relationship, and that they promise so much and they never, they can't deliver everything that I dream up, because I feel like I want to live in a game world, and they can never fully develop it because it's, a 2D picture or 3D pictures on a 2D screen. And I'm hoping that virtual reality kind of extends that opportunity to live in your game world a little bit more. But even then, it's something that's in the future. And so LitRPG definitely fulfills that wish fulfillment aspect of living in a world with game mechanics for me.
Well, not only that, I mean, as an old school, I mean, I'm not that old school, but as an old school gamer, and I think you are too, like you played vanilla WoW too, right?
Yeah, I played WoW when it came out. I played just about every MMO that's ever come on the market. I always give it a chance, and I do it, and I'm sort of disappointed after maybe a year or something.
Yeah.
But
you're going to be picking up what I put down here. So I played WoW. WoW is the first MMO I played where I actually got to end game content. And when the expansion came out, I liked it, but at the same time, it's like greens at level 61 were better than my Nax stuff. So at that point, I realized that gear was irrelevant. Like anytime a new expansion comes out, there's going to be new gear sets, and it's going to make everything else irrelevant, which makes your work irrelevant, which means to me, the reason I play MMOs is for the experience. And I think that where a lot of developers are going wrong these days is they're making it all about the gear, because that's the quick fix for people who don't have a lot of time to play or aren't really into MMOs, but they're missing the bar so much, because it's still I don't care if people are casual or not. It's the experience that makes you feel good. It's the experience where you can like get sucked into the game. Like I remember playing vanilla WoW. Like first I played it, I played Alliance side because I didn't know any better. But like when I was a night elf, like running around that forest in vanilla WoW, I was completely sucked into that game. Like it was
you
like
spend like an hour looking around at the trees and the landscape.
Around. It was amazing. And that sense of wonder I don't get from games anymore, but I do from LitRPG books.
I kind of get that as far as like a game experience. I get that from virtual reality. I'm a huge advocate of like the Rift and the Gear VR and the HTC Vive, all that good stuff. If you've ever had a chance to try that stuff, it gives you the same kind of feeling of like, wow, this is cool and this is new. And I feel a sense of presence that I haven't gotten from traditional video games in a real long time. Like regular video games are so fun, and their gameplay mechanics are more familiar, and they're fun in a traditional sense. But VR just has this ability when you put on a headset, even though you look kind of funny with it on, you forget it's there. As far as your brain goes, you feel like you're there in that world, even though the graphics are obviously not photorealistic. They don't need to be. when you're looking on the edge of a building and you look down and it's like 5 stories down, you feel a sense of vertigo because your eyes and your brain are getting input saying I'm on the edge of a building. Even though your rest of your body is sitting down, your brain is still full enough that you feel a sense of presence, and you get vertigo when you do that kind of stuff. And it's a very interesting way of playing a video game when you don't have to use the mouse to look around. You're using your head, and it's kind of cool. So I think virtual reality is going to extend that sense of immersion that we kind of had from like those beginning levels of WoW and like the Elven Forest and that kind of stuff.
That will be so awesome. I want deep dive VR before I'm like too old to walk, because then I can just lay in my bed and waste away while I'm like, killing noobs.
I'm totally ready to plug into the Matrix and have the implant put in my head, and I'm ready for that stuff, man. I'm totally an advocate for that kind of technology. As long as I can have a good time in VR, I'll do whatever.
It's funny when you were talking about the headset though, and you said it looks dumb, and I'm like, oh, I can't do that, with my armor on.
Yeah, no, but it's kind of an investment now. It's early tech, but it's still kind of fun to play around. I can't afford it sometimes, but I still love getting it. It's not quite ready for mass market stuff, mostly because of content isn't there. Like there's not 1 or 2 games that are like super outstanding, like Witcher or Assassin's Creed. There's nothing like that for virtual reality yet. They're just small, cool experiences there currently, and they're really cool. It's just they're not 60-hour games. They're 2-hour experiences, or they're like really cool experiences where like you're in a 360 environment, going around Europe or whatever.
That's because you can't really move, and until you can move around freely, until there's some way to move around, there can't be a full game, right?
Right. Yeah, they do controllers, or Oculus just has this wands that you can have little buttons to move around with. And HTC Vive does allow you to move around in a small confined space because they have room tracking. And so they can actually track your body moving around in an empty space. And that's kind of a cool experience. And Oculus is doing that as well on the slightly smaller space setting. But you're right, until they have like treadmills or some way to move around like longer distances, or it tricks you into moving around a square room in circles, and you feel like you're moving around whatever distance in the room. Yeah, it is sort of limiting, unfortunately. But I love the projection of what it's going to be in the future, hopefully. But moving away from those kind of side topics, I want to ask you a few questions about your experience as a publisher, because I know for me personally, these are very interesting right now. I'm curious about what your experiences are with publishing Delvers LLC. The first way that you published it was on the Amazon Kindle direct publishing platform, I think it is. Right. How was your experience doing that?
It was kind of, for me anyway, it was kind of a steep learning curve. The thing about all the publishing and self-publishing is that if you just want to put your shit up there and you don't care about how it looks and you don't really take a lot of pride in your work, like you can get a crappy cover from Fiverr for like $10 with some random, usually stolen image from like DeviantArt. It's like there's a lot of shady stuff that goes on. You can just take a Word document, throw it on there. Like there's a very low barrier to entry.
I should know. I like that about it.
You like outsold me in a week. But anyway, to do it well, to have a nice cover like I have or like you have, these things require knowing people in the industry. They require kind of looking around. They require getting onto websites and familiarizing yourself with them. So my experience was that for me personally, I think being a web serial writer helped a lot because I was able to ease the transition over a few months. If I just had my story and I wrote it on my own and suddenly I wanted to publish it, I think I would have been completely overwhelmed, like absolutely overwhelmed. There is just so much that goes into it. Like you need to understand the royalty rates. You need to understand how Amazon sells to different regions. You need to understand, the Kindle Select program. You need to understand how promotion works, how paid ads work, how, what's a good ROI for these places, which means return on investment. It's an amazing amount of information to consume in one fell swoop. So, and that doesn't even figure like, creating your own website if you have one. That took me a while because that was not a skill set I had. I had to teach myself on YouTube. YouTube, which is awesome. Like, really seriously, as an aside, nobody has any excuse to not know how to do anything anymore if they want to learn, because it's like the knowledge is there. So yeah, I mean, learning learning how to create my own website, learning just little things like you know, I realized by the end of my first book that I was making some grammatical and some punctuation errors. And I thought I was pretty decent at grammar. So I had to go through my entire book and like basically, not only was I editing, I was also looking for these pesky things that didn't jump out at me because I wrote an entire book wrong like that. So like,
as a writer, it's hard for you to see those little things because your brain is fixing them because you've read it so many times, or just because that's what your brain normally does. And so having a base of beta readers or whatever is really useful, but it's not something you would normally have access to unless you have a supportive community of writers and stuff.
Yeah, so having beta readers, for me, having an online serial, like they basically function kind of as my beta readers. They ask questions like, hey, this doesn't make sense, you're stupid. And I'm like, yes, I am stupid, I am going to fix that. So I did my first edit. I did like a second edit after my book was done. Then I sent it off to my editor who did line editing, or it was copy editing. You know, everybody calls it different. That's another thing. Like in the community, in the writing community for indies, there are different terms for things that people use interchangeably that really shouldn't be used interchangeably. So like I had to constantly, like, who am I talking to now? Oh, I have to use this term. Like I have to constantly change my what I called things depending on who my audience was. So just little things like that. I mean, it's really, I keep telling people this, especially people who either haven't published yet or have published and they get like 5 sales a year and they're upset about it and they want to know why. What I always tell everybody is, when you are self-publishing, you are basically an entrepreneur. Like your book, selling your book, you are your own business. And in order to be successful, you have to make people happy. Like your readers are your customers. Like you can't walk into it, you know, thinking, oh, I'm just going to make some money by throwing some stuff together. Like you really need to feel it. You really need to be excited about what you're doing. And I think one reason for your success is because, I mean, you love LitRPG, you know, and I really do. I get it, because I think that personally, I'm a lazy writer. Like I didn't even know what freaking genre I was writing in. I mean, I was halfway done with my book. I mean, there are all these ways that I could have tripped up and sabotaged myself, but I love LitRPG and I love Portal Fantasy. I mean, I'm at a loss for words. I love it so much. Like I'm just geeking out on what I'm talking about myself. So
no, absolutely right. I think enthusiasm is a really big seller because it comes through in your presentation, in your writing, and that's a big selling point. Because if you're enthusiastic about something you love, other people are more likely to kind of catch on to that enthusiasm. And I think that's a part of the growth of the medium, and that everyone here is super enthusiastic about the genre. And they're willing to tell all their friends because they love it so much. But I think you're also correct in that there are some things that set you up for success a little bit better that you don't automatically know. I think I was really fortunate as a writer in that I had other authors really just kind of throwing advice and saying, this is the thing that I learned to be successful. And I kind of already had a base set up because of the LitRPG podcast and the Geek Bike Podcast. I had a website. I had a way to communicate to people who were in this audience, and I had us kind of by default, I guess, by coincidence, a way to minimally promote my own stuff, and I think that's part of why the book is done so well. But it's really been a huge accident on my part as far as like the success goes. And you're right, there are certain things, but I think self-publishing is still easier than traditional publishing, in my opinion. There's the lower barrier entry means you can do it if you're motivated, but it is very much a self-promotion, hard work, putting it out there, and your book's going to succeed or fail on its own merits, not because of some other company editing and promoting it for you.
So
what would be your advice for somebody who's thinking about putting up a book on Amazon, whether it's LitRPG or not? What can they do to set themselves up for success in advance of publishing?
So it kind of depends. If we're talking about LitRPG, which I'm assuming we are because of this podcast,
Okay.
I would try to find at least beta readers. Not everybody is comfortable putting their work up online, and not everybody writes linearly. Like, for instance, Travis Bagwell, who's part of my LitRPG group, you know, he wrote his second book offline, and I wish he'd hurry up and frickin' launch it because I want to read it. But you know, most writers would prefer, in fact, I would prefer the ability to go back to previous chapters and change stuff. And writing linearly from point A to point B, I think personally is more difficult. So I would say that if somebody is wanting to put their work on Amazon, it's important to get people that you trust to look at your work. And you also need to be able to kind of swallow your pride and listen to them as long as you trust them. This is a really good point, because when I was first writing my very first book that I ended up canning, I mean, it was terrible, but I had a few beta readers who were people I knew, and they didn't read the genre I liked. And one in particular gave me really terrible advice, and it was really kind of soul crushing. And it was really, I think it was one of the reasons why I eventually got my writer's block, because it was like I wasn't hearing anything positive. And because I was only on Wattpad, I wasn't getting, like, nobody was saying anything. It was like I was putting my work into a black hole, and the only person who was saying anything was this beta reader who, like, didn't get what I was trying to do at all. So I think it's very important to get people to look at your work that you trust, who can be honest with you, and you can take their advice. It doesn't mean you need to do what they say, but you need to listen, and you need to vet them appropriately. For if you go on Royal Road or you make your own website, people are going to come to your work organically who like what you're doing. So they're really going to be some of the best beta readers. Or like if you already have a book out, you know, somebody who has already read your first or second book or whatever, they understand what you're doing. They understand, you know, the story you're trying to tell. So they're going to be some of the best people to get. And also, don't skimp on your cover. Like, you know, we are very lucky. We're part of a tight-knit community of readers, some very prolific readers who love LitRPG. We in other genres, and even in our genre, having a good cover is very important, because most people won't know you from Adam, especially if you're brand new. All they're going to see is your little thumbnail. So you need to make sure that your cover looks decent when it's small too. Like if you have all kinds of intricate detail, that's not necessarily a good cover. So that's kind of like my spiel. That's my elevator pitch for trying to sell a book as a first time indie.
Yeah, perfect. I love those pieces of advice. Have people are going to help you out, but they have to understand your genre and the things that make your story interesting within that community. So finding a community, I think, is also important.
Yes.
Because you can draw resources from that community, whether it's LitRPG or sci-fi or fantasy, whatever it's going to be. Having a cover art is important. I think we actually share the same cover artist. I ended up using the same one you did, and so I'm like, yay, this is awesome. She does great work.
Yeah, I referred you, didn't I?
Yeah, I asked you about it. I'm like, who is this? And you're like, we have this cool relationship. I don't know if you want to use her or not, but you can ask her if she wants to do it for you. And I did. And I was like, and she was like, yeah, well, this is awesome. I'd love to do this. Send me the monies and I will do the things.
Yeah, she's amazing. So once again, awesome community.
Yeah, and honestly, yeah, all my success is from the community. I got tips on marketing from authors. I got tips on cover work from you and structure, and you know, interviewing LitRPG authors has been really educational for me, because I get this advice from all you guys, and that's why I ask these questions, because none of it was educational for me, but other authors within the community who are looking to create a good, successful LitRPG story. These are the things that experience has taught us, that these are things that we wish we'd learned the first time, but we're happy to pass on to new people so that they can be successful.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, you've been in a very good place to kind of learn from everybody who came. And I mean, I did that too. Like before I ever published, I reached out to like Drew Hayes and some other indie writers, and I got a lot of great advice from them. And like I owe a lot of my success to them too. So I understand exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about the next part. Marketing. Marketing is hard and difficult for a lot of authors because they don't know what to do and they don't know what's successful. What kind of marketing has worked out for you?
So that's kind of a loaded question, because when it comes to marketing and it comes to promotion, everybody's different. I'm a ridiculous person. Like, I am sitting here in an interview wearing freaking armor. Like, most people are not me. So I started writing, and I've done things like I created my own LitRPG group. I've done a website. I'm pretty much everywhere online. Like, I've established kind of a really serious online presence within the last year.
Yeah.
So I think some people have an easier some people have an easier time doing that than others, but that's not the only way to get promotion. There's also places like BookBub, which I'm not a huge fan of, but like Book Barbarian. There's websites where people can basically get on a newsletter and send their books out. There's also I had really great success with Fiverr. There's actually some Fiverr places where you can pay them, to put your books on their list. There are just a ton of ways to go about it. Like, it's really more of an art than science, which is why whenever anybody asks me that question, I'm like, I need to make, all these qualifying statements before I say anything. But for me personally, I kind of just became part of the community. Like, it seems like a lot of people know who I am. And whether that's Reddit, Royal Road, I was even on Inkit for a while before they really pissed me off, but that's another story. I just get around a lot. Like, when I'm not writing and I'm not working, I'm promoting, which not everybody can do too. Like, if people have kids, that's not necessarily an option. You can't just stay home and promote when you got to pick somebody up from school. So, I've kind of put my personal life on hold while I'm doing this. So for what works for me in a nutshell is having no life and being in front of the computer 24/7.
Hear that, folks? If you want to be successful out there, have no other life.
It's not the most glamorous thing to say in the world, but it's kind of like the way I see it. It's like I said, being a writer is like owning a small business. At least being an indie writer is like owning a small business. You have to put in the time eventually. So if you put in all the time up front and you get to a good steady state, you can kind of walk away from it a little bit and have breathing room and get your work-life balance fixed. Whereas if you don't put enough time or enough capital into it to begin with, your business might just fail and you might have wasted your time. And I don't want to waste my time. Like, I want to build something. Like, for me personally, it may sound a little grandiose, it may sound a little ridiculous, but I want to build something that's going to outlast me, even if it's only by 10 or 20 years. And I mean, I love Zelazny as a writer. In fact, I got the Zelazny book on my kind of half-assed shrine thing over here. It's not really anything. But like, he's the man is not with us anymore. And yet there are people like me who still read his stuff and love it. Heinlein's another one who's probably going to pass the test of time. There are these writers out there like Ursula K. Le Guin. Like, there are writers who have created things that are far going to outlast them. And I don't necessarily think that I'm going to be able to do that, but I can sure as hell try.
Yeah, I think that's a great, admirable goal in creating a community and a universe that people can enjoy beyond your lifetime. And I think that's a great way to look at your writing, because it makes it more important to you, and you take a farther look when you're writing your stories than you do necessarily if you're just writing pulp fiction that you're expecting people to read and burn. So I think it's a very different perspective on writing a universe instead of just writing a one book or two books or whatever it is. And I think that's the way to last. So I'm glad you have that attitude.
Oh, thank you. Now, that said, there are some writers out there who have done single books, like Michael Stackpole. His Talion Revenant book, that's one of my favorite fantasy books to this day. And that was his very first book. It's a standalone. Like, I've been wanting him to write a sequel forever, but that will always be one of my favorites. So I think there are single, like Dune, for instance, but I mean, I'm not Frank Herbert. I'm not that talented.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like, there's some great authors that I admire, but I know I'm never going to be, and I'm okay with that. I understand my limitations as an author and as a writer and as a reader, and I'm okay with those limitations, and I work within those confines, and I do the best job that I can, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I don't think I'm ever going to get rich. That's not the goal. Anybody who's trying to is like barking up the wrong tree. But the fact that my readers care enough to care about my story, the fact that they want to hear my silly stories in the first place, and the fact that they're helping me pay off my student loans, like I love my readers. My readers are I really, really love them. They make it all worth it. You know, if I didn't have my readers, I'd just be like talking to myself and making up these silly stories. They'd be like the ravings of a madman. Instead, I've got people asking me about Mohali culture and creating this amazing community. So it's still a little surreal for me. I'm sure it's, you know, I'm a few months ahead of you, so it's probably even more surreal for you. But it's a really cool feeling. It's like becoming part of the Borg.
Yeah, it's very much there's a word validation when people like this, the stuff that's coming out of your brain, and it's like, oh, you like this thing that I did? Are you sure that you like this thing? And you're not just being nice and polite about it. And they're like, yeah, it's really cool. I'm like, awesome. Yeah, I get what you're saying, man. Absolutely. Now, speaking of your readers, we have some questions from those readers.
Okay.
We're going to begin with, of course, everyone's question: when is Delvers LLC Book 2 going to be ready, my friend?
I'm trying to get it out in February. I'm a little over halfway done with the second book. I'm really hoping if I can get it out in February, it's going to really depend on how much I write during the holiday season, because I'm not going to be working during that time. And as a very dedicated basement dwelling creature, which I am, I'm going to be in front of my computer the entire time. So like, I'm not doing anything for Christmas. I'm pounding out like chapters for Delvers LLC. So if I can get it out in February, it will be because I was able to be productive during that time. So cross your fingers, everybody. I'm really trying hard. If it's not February, it's going to be like March. So it's not too long.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you for the answer on the question. I have a couple questions about your stories. My first question personally was, oh my gosh, the ending of book 1 was absolutely surprising. And I was like, wow, he's just an evil writer to do this to his characters. You just couldn't give them a happy ending, my friend. I'm like, because it was going pretty happy. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good ending. And then I'm like, oh no, this is not a good ending. So what can you tell us about the mysterious group that the bandits were working for at the very end?
So I can tell you that it's very mysterious. You're going to get like glimpses of it. I know, mysterious is mysterious. You're going to get glimpses of it in the second book, but this is going to be something that's kind of the character, like the group, Delvers LLC, the company, everybody involved in Delvers are going to slowly figure this out. And part of the challenge is that, you know, there's different countries, and it actually takes time to get from country to country. And Ludus is a very dangerous world. So, like, in book 2, for people who are following book 2, there's kind of a lot of traveling, and there's a lot of actually exploring the world. Kind of like the first book was basically survival, right? It was like, first of all, how are we going to survive? How are we going to fit into this world? And, you know, what are we going to do about all these weird people who don't look like us and don't think like us? The second book is more like, okay, so how are we going to fit into this world in the long run? How are we going to deal with some of these new political pressures that are being pushed on us? And also, we need to get the point A to point B in a fantasy world. Like, holy crap, this is I mean, it's like it's a real thing, you know. It's not like you can just hop on the rail and be there in half a day. So to answer, that's kind of a long answer to your question. I apologize, but basically,
the more details I get, I'm happy with, man. So yeah. So yeah,
what I'm alluding to is that there are people in the shadows all over the place, and eventually everything will come out. But like, you know, I used to be a game master. I used to be a DM, and I've run some campaigns for like over a year, so I know how to tell a story, and it's happening.
Okay. That's fair. You don't want to spoil the main villain of these characters, so I get that, and I appreciate the information that you've given so far. My last personal question was, your weapon collection, man. You have I just looking at the picture here. You have a number of weapons. I see balls and chains. I see swords of great variety, and then you have knives galore. How many weapons do you have in your collection?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. Antiques, I think I have about a dozen. Knives, it really depends. Like I collect high-end knives, and I also just have, pocket knives that I use. I just, for me, it's like I really appreciate well-made things, and I really like antiques because if you hold an antique, it's like you're holding history in your hand. Like if you hold like a sword that was used in the Napoleonic era, like it's just amazing to think of all the things that sword has seen. I guess maybe at heart I'm a bad poet, but it's because it's just a piece of steel, right? But I really get that feeling. It makes me feel like I can touch the past a little bit. So if I had to guess, I'd say like 60. I don't, maybe more, maybe twice that. I don't know. I didn't count. I can't. As long as I don't count, I don't feel bad about spending all my money on this weird. It's like after I die, people are going to look at my house and be like, wow, this guy was a real weirdo.
He's like, what are all these pointy things? Why did he need them for?
Yeah. But some of it is actually research for Delvers. Like I've got
research material, man. That's what you claim in your taxes.
I've got my bronze knives. In fact, for people who have been reading the new chapters, Tony's dagger is actually based on this bronze knife. It's got the horse head, and it's actually a nice little bronze dagger. I figured that maybe one day, if enough people read Delvers, I can auction this off for charity or something.
So you definitely got to show them you showed me earlier some of your weapons. You got to show them the Kopesh.
Oh, okay. Well, this isn't real. It's actually just polymer, but this is what Henry used in book 1. It's like it's a Kopesh, which is basically an Egyptian sword from way back in the day, and it actually originated during the Bronze Age. And they kept using this pattern after the Iron Age, the dawn of the Iron Age. So this is one of those weapons. It's a really interesting weapon because it actually transcended 2 technological ages. And I personally geek out on that. I think that's just really amazing. And it's really interesting design too, because even though this is fake, you can see how with the curve of the blade, the outside of the blade is right here, which means that if you hit something with it, you have this really strong joint. And bronze is kind of, in fact, for people who aren't familiar with it, and most people probably aren't because I'm a weirdo, bronze is easily bendable. It takes a set. And it's really interesting that we actually have so many ancient bronze weapons because iron actually rots, like just like on Ludus, but slower. Iron and steel, it rusts. It gets destroyed if people don't take care of it.
Right,
bronze is hardier, and on top of that, if you bend bronze, you can just bend it right back. It's actually back in the day when people had bronze weapons, it was easier to care for them, and if it gets really messed up, you can just melt it down and make a new blade. So we actually have quite a few surviving bronze weapons from the Bronze Era. I just think that's really interesting.
Yeah, so awesome. I love those things about history and weapons technology and development. I'm kind of nerdy about that kind of stuff as well, man. So thanks. Okay. Now for some questions from the actual audience. Matthew Sylvester asked, what got you started in LitRPG as opposed to some other genre? I think he means maybe writing.
So really what that boils down to is my 2 favorite genres. And it's funny because I didn't even know it was called LitRPG before it was LitRPG, but my 2 favorite genres are Portal Fantasy and LitRPG. So I've been reading primarily Portal Fantasy and LitRPG for pleasure for like the last 5 years. So when it came time for me to write my own story, especially as a writing exercise, what came most natural to me and what was most fun was writing something that was moving into LitRPG. Like I've been reading, Is It Okay to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? That's probably not the real title. It's a mouthful. But I watched Sword Art Online. In fact, I watched Sword Art Online with my fiance, and even she liked it. And she usually doesn't like most of the geeky, weebish stuff that I like. And I really enjoy that kind of tangible sense of progression. I think that I personally don't write crafting stories. I'm hitting my chest plate. I personally don't write crafting stories, but I get it. I mean, I enjoy that too. And one thing I really love about the LitRPG genre is I think that it affords people even more creativity than just standard fantasy and sci-fi, because it feels like if you're writing fantasy and sci-fi, so much has already been done before. And it's like, there's only so many ways we can retell what an orc looks like, right? There's only so many ways we can retell kind of the hero's journey and, you know, some farm boy getting a ring or a sword or whatever. It's like, I know that not all fantasy is like that, but for me personally, it feels like it's very difficult to tell something that's fresh. Whereas with LitRPG, we're talking about like including mechanics that wouldn't make sense in most other fantasy and sci-fi. So it opens up an entire new world of possibilities for writers. So like I just kind of ran with that. I just you know, I was like, you know, I really want to tell a story which is portal fantasy where regular people get powers that makes a little bit of sense. And I love science fantasy. I love fantasy or magic that has some sort of grounding in like rules, just like Brandon Sanderson. Like Brandon Sanderson is a huge influence on me. So that's really where that came from, is I wanted to tell a story that had just enough realism that it could like be grabbed onto by standard or regular fantasy fans, but it had enough fun and some of that tangible, you know, progression that as a lit RPG fan, I could really get into it and you know, feel the satisfaction of people leveling up.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that answer. Next question. Richard Hewson asks, any update on the release date for Delvers LLC as an audiobook?
Yeah, actually. So Delvers LLC, Welcome to Ludus, my first book, is actually going to be releasing in December. And the very talented Jeff Hayes, who did the I'm sorry, he's actually a friend of mine. I'm forgetting his series name. The Selfless Heroes series. He actually did the narration for that, and I think he did a fantastic job, and I think he's doing an amazing job on Delvers. One cool thing about Jeff is that he has his own Twitch channel, so I was actually able to watch him read like 8 chapters, I believe, maybe even more, and he just does he does an amazing job. Like I don't even know how he keeps track of all his voices that he does, but every individual character in Delvers has their own voice with Jeff, and I couldn't ask for a better narrator. So I'm really excited about that coming out, and I hope some other folks are too.
Awesome. I'm definitely one of those. I'm a huge audiobook listener. The nature of my work allows me to just play it in headphones and just go work, you know, and go do my thing. I listen to a ton of audiobooks, podcasts. So I'm definitely going to be one of your listeners of your audiobook.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited about that. I hope you like it.
I hope so too. Okay. Next question. Dustin Smith asks, how long are you planning to make your, I'm assuming Delvers LLC series?
Right now I'm planning about 5 books, but that might move into other books. Like I said before, I think I said earlier in this interview, like Ramon and I talked for quite a bit before this interview, so I get things mixed up. But I have been planning to write the book that I failed at, and it was terrible, and I let it go before writing Delvers. I still want to eventually come back to that. And the greater universe is actually a universe that Delvers takes place in. And I would like to revisit that series that I wanted to write, and I would also like to explore just more of that universe. So Delvers itself, I foresee being 5 books, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are done with adventures, you know, with Henry and Jason.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's a great answer. Jeff Hayes asks, is your refrigerator running?
Yes.
Then you better catch it. Yeah, so there you go. There's the joke. Bump. Okay, next question. Next question is from Hayes McGee. Who are your major influences?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I have several, and the first I want to probably shout out is Robert Jordan. Like a lot of newer readers don't get into Robert Jordan, but when I was a teenager, I started reading Robert Jordan. And the end of that series, when Brandon Sanderson ended it, to me felt like the end of an era. And one of the reasons why I want to mention Robert Jordan, it had a huge influence on me because, and I'm going to geek out here as a writer a little bit, so for fair warning. A lot of stories don't tell stories about polygamous relationships in a serious manner. Like most of what we get is like harem, or it's, you know, silly hijinks, and it's very like puerile, it's very goofy, this one or two dimensional characters. Robert Jordan was the first author I read who really explored like a multiples type of relationship in a serious manner with realistic, or to me, believable characters who had different cultures. And that blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind. And one thing I want to do with Delvers and with the greater universe is explore that myself. And for people who have read the book, there are other races in my universe where women a number more than, you know, there are more women than men. And I came up with that idea because I was like, if I were a god and I were creating a warlike race, wouldn't it make sense to have more women than men? Because, like, for instance, in our past, in wars on Earth, you know, sometimes if one country would kill enough men in another country, the other country would just die because they wouldn't have enough people to reproduce to populate their country anymore. A 1-to-1 ratio of men and women for primates, which is what we are, it doesn't make any sense. It really kind of doesn't, unless you're trying to like have, you know, more generations of people. So I was thinking to myself, like, if there were other races in the universe and they were prolific enough to cultivate new planets, and, you know, if they were just that far spread, it would make sense to me that part of that would be because they maybe have that advantage. So then I started thinking to myself, if those type of people, like, you know, for instance, we have Ariva on Ludus, and we have other cultures on Ludus who have more women than men, wouldn't that mean they have a matriarchal society? And wouldn't that mean that marriage in their culture is completely different? So I know that I'm kind of going all over the place. But anyway, long story short, Robert Jordan. I can talk about books and authors all day, and I'm not.
I love Robert Jordan. For slightly different reasons. I think I never thought about that particular aspect of it, but you are correct. It's taken seriously. It's not a joke as far as like the polygamous relationships. And he does it so well that I hadn't thought of it as that. I just thought of it as, okay, yeah, that makes sense within that setting in the universe. But I love the magic system in Robert Jordan's books, and it was kind of an inspiration for my own magic system in my book as well. Just like the way that it made sense. And it wasn't just, oh, I wave a wand and I say some magic words and something happens necessarily.
Yeah, it was like a skill. It's weaving different elements together and whatnot. Like, I loved it because you still don't get the nitty gritty of how it's done. And I was also inspired by that too, by the way. You don't really understand how it's done. Like, it's not spelled out for you, but everything is consistent.
Right.
So
it feels like it's based on like science and some rule system instead of just because it's magic.
So Robert Jordan is a big one for me, especially based on the magic and the culture. Another is Roger Zelazny, because the Amber series is going to be one of my favorite until the day I die. I just love the Amber series. When Corwin wakes up and he's like so cagey and so, you know, paranoid that he's basically making his own family think that he knows things that he doesn't know. That is some of the best writing I've ever read in my life. I don't care what, like, bar none, I can read the first book of that series over and over again.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm with a lot of authors. Was there anyone else who's an influence for you?
Oh yeah. So thinking. So David or Eric Flint, David Drake, David Weber, all the Davids, Ursula K. Le Guin, Deborah Chester. Just I mean, I'm pretty well read within the science fiction fantasy genre, and I can pick up something from just about all of them. Like Jim Butcher is a big one. Terry Goodkind for like the first few books of his Sword of Truth, I just really loved until he started kind of going off on a tangent. But
it went in a weird location, weird place. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, it just like, I gotta say, the last few books of the Sword of Truth series was just like all rape all the time.
Yeah, I like the prequel that they did, the Dead of Bones, which was kind of good return to that earlier storytelling that I really loved about that series personally. But so yeah, those are all great influences. I'm going to move on to the next question though. We have Jeremy Beckett, which asks, why did you choose to have the character swallow orbs rather than some other form of granting power? Is having to sleep before you get the benefit akin to a computer rebooting?
That is a really good question. I'm trying to think of how I can answer that without giving too many things away. So the main reason for that is because I wanted to create a magic system that made sense and had at least some of its roots in technology. Like, I love science fantasy. And the idea of Dolos really comes from being a researcher and people getting power for a reason. Like, I didn't want a world where you just end up, it's like you're transported there and then you just magically get magic. That never made sense to me. I mean, I love those stories, but it doesn't make any sense. Except for, like, the Soprano Sorceress, where somebody like song is magic. Those are, I mean, these are cool ideas, right? But that's still like that's still an outside power that somebody is either channeling or affecting through something they do. I wanted my characters to have their power be internal, but with the do and whatnot, they're still kind of channeling. It's just the source walks with them. They're not using some mystical force or I wanted to make midi-chlorians not stupid. So the short answer to that is I wanted my character's power to be internal, and the easiest way to internalize something as biological creatures is to ingest it. So the other side of that is rebooting and sleeping and whatnot. Kind of. As everybody's probably seen who's read the books, there is an obvious connection between, like, orbs and some sort of intelligence, right? At least as curators. So I'm actually going to cover this, but I will say this. There is a reason why people are operated on while they're unconscious. Like, if you're conscious and you're being operated on, you can mess things up. Like, even if you're completely numb, you can mess things up. So I think that's a really good way to explain why somebody would have to be asleep while an orb might be rewiring their mind or their soul.
So that's fair. Those are all fair answers. Thank you very much. Jay Taylor asked next. He wants to get an elevator pitch for the new series. I assume he means Secrets of the Old Ones.
Imagine a VR game that's indistinguishable from reality other than your game mechanics, that is set in the Victorian era. I'm not saying Victorian England, but the Victorian era, that is like an H.P. Lovecraft story with magic and monsters that can fuck up your sanity.
There you go, folks. There's a lot of stuff in there to unpack, but that's his pitch. Okay, next question. Hayes McGee. When did you start writing? I think you sort of answered this already.
Like when I was 8.
Okay,
so
there you go.
I've been writing more or less since I knew how to put words together. So
yeah, which is strange to me because I this is the first thing that I've ever written. My story, Adventure Terror, first thing I ever wrote creatively, like seriously. Everything else has been like technical writing for like college and papers and things like that. But so I'm like, oh, great. I kind of admire your way of doing it because you've had a lot of time to refine your creative process. And for me, it's been kind of this huge crapshoot of figuring it out the hard way, like experimenting scientifically a lot.
I think that there's advantages on both, though, because the advantage of not having done it before is that you're approaching it as an adult and as somebody who's read a lot, so that you kind of have a fresh look and you can establish your style kind of from scratch. The advantage of doing it where you've written your whole life is that I can just slap some shit on a page and it will look all right without a lot of editing. So there's advantages to both, I think.
Okay. Jeremy Beckett asks, can you get a rap song for all your releases? So you want to explain that one?
So yeah, there's a story behind this. So I was on Reddit and I saw that another author had commissioned a rap trailer for her book, which was a sci-fi book. And I thought it was so funny, and I thought the rapper was so talented. I mean, it's goofy, but the rapper is legitimately talented. And I was like, this is kind of cool. So I reached out to him, and I had him do a rap trailer for Delvers. And I love it. Like, I tried to share it with some other writers. One who is a very well-known LitRPG writer said that he just couldn't even get through it, which was hilarious to me. But yeah, I think I'm going to reach out to him for every book and get a new trailer for every book. In fact, I might even have him do one for my first Secret of the Old Ones novella.
Perfect. Hey, that it's a unique way of promoting your book. I definitely admit that. I'm like, trailers and book trailers to me in general feel kind of weird because it's a visual description of a written medium. I'm like, okay, that's kind of it. In my brain, it's like, oh, I would never have thought of it, much less a rap version of that kind of thing. I'm like, oh, okay, that's definitely unique.
I don't watch other trailers. That's just not how I get into books.
Yeah.
But other people do, and I want to, reach more people. And on top of that, it's a rap song about my book. Like, I just can't. I can't get enough.
And where can people find your rap song?
They can either find it on YouTube just by searching my name, or they can also find it all around Facebook. Or, I don't know if you're going to have a link, but that would be helpful.
Totally. Yeah.
And also, I was going to say something. It was actually, oh, well, I'm wearing armor. Who cares?
Can they find it on your website, blaisecorvin.com?
It's on one of, I haven't featured it. It's in some of my chapter headings. But I might feature it more prominently. I'm not sure yet. It's really for people who are into trailers, and it seems like most of them try to find them on YouTube. So, or I mean on Facebook. So
no problem. I'll, as a matter of fact, I'm probably going to edit it in like about now, like a little clip of it, so people can get like a little snippet of your rap video, and then I'll like go back to the regular interview. But
Blaise Corvin presents Delvers LLC. Welcome to Ludus.
Oh, welcome to Ludus. I hope you know how to fight, 'cause Dolos might take your life. Oh, swords to the magic granting orbs. Can they do this? Oh, welcome to Ludus.
Abducted by Dolos, they wanna go home. Surviving on loot, it's not easy to do this. Martial arts students, but here on this world are goblins and monsters, and they're the imposters. Dolos don't care, he's a prick in the air. Vain, self-centered, nothing is fair. Swords and sorcery heading to battle. Can Henry and Jason get back to Seattle?
Oh, welcome to Ludus. I hope you know how to fight, 'cause Dolos might take your life. Oh, swords to the magic granting orbs. Can they do this? Oh, welcome to Ludus.
Find out if Henry and Jason ever get out of Ludus and make it back to Seattle. Get your copy now on Amazon.com.
So if you're watching this, not live, folks, I hope you enjoyed that trailer. Okay. Next question. Actually, that's it. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that I haven't included? We talked about the audiobook. We talked about Delvers LLC 1, book 2 coming out February-ish, hopefully. Secrets of the Old Ones is hopefully going to come out in January. We have your rap video, and of course your Patreon, which is where people can support you and give you a little bit of cash every month to help motivate you to put out those chapters faster at patreon.com/Blaise Corvin. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, my friend?
just one more thing. I realize that not everybody might know what Victorian era means for Secret of the Old Ones, so I want to explain that a little bit. So when people think of like Sherlock Holmes, it would be a good example. If people think of steampunk, like the era that people wore long coats and top hats and had cane swords and like pistols kind of sucked, but people still carried them, that sort of thing. It's like the era where there were steamboats in the river. It's like there's steam technology, there's black powder, there's pistols. It's like it's the transitional time between kind of old school technology and, you know, the turn of the mass production or the era of mass production rather. So when I talk about Secret of the Old Ones, it's kind of like the idea that people from our future who have computers in their heads are going back to this game where they can play in a more quaint era, just like we do with the medieval times that we play in. So that's kind of the idea that I wanted to explore, that to them, like the Victorian era was just as archaic as when we play something that's set in like 14th century Europe.
Perfect. Thank you very much for clarifying your setting on Secret of the Old Ones. That's pretty cool. That's gonna be it for the interview. Where's the best place for people to follow you and find your work if they want to learn more about Delvers LLC or Secret of the Old Ones?
I would suggest going to my website. I have a lot of information there. Not only that, I would also suggest if anybody is interested in supporting my work or they want to buy any books, to like or follow my actual author page on Amazon. If you do that, whenever I release a new book on Amazon, Amazon will tell you. So that's probably the easiest way to make sure you don't miss anything I put out there.
Yeah, absolutely perfect. And I think you have a newsletter on there as well if they want to sign up for that on your webpage at blaise-corvin.com. We're going to have links in the show notes for all those places you can find Blaise Corvin. He has a website. He has a Facebook page, Blaise Corvin Writer. He created the LitRPG Society to support indie and web LitRPG series. He has a Twitter handle. He's on Patreon. He has an Amazon author page. He has places for all of his books, including his website, The Rural Road. And you can also find him on Goodreads if you want to look him up there as well. He has a bit of a thing there as well. And again, all the notes, all those things are in the show notes for this.
I've been around the block a few times.
Yeah. When he said that he created a huge web presence, he is not joking around, folks. But for the podcast, folks, that's going to be it. Thank you very much for taking your time out of your busy schedule, Blaise, to talk to me and to the audience and answering their questions. I'm sure they appreciate all the wonderful insights you've given them into Delvers LLC, Secrets of the Old Ones, and of course your writing process and publishing and all that good stuff as well. So, but thank you very much for talking to me. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, this has been really fun, and I like pretending that I know something. I really don't. So, like, I don't know anything. So that's my disclaimer for everything I've said. I don't know shit. So, you know, but follow me. Maybe in another year I'll know something. I can give some good advice.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, man. And the audience, thank you very much for taking the time to listen and watch this thing. We do this out of love, and we appreciate your love back, folks. For the LitRPG podcast, I'm Ramon Mejia. And remember, folks, until I see you next time, remember to go read some LitRPG.
Bye-bye.